Alrighty guys, so today's video is going to be an interesting one. It's a Warhammer one. I know I don't do much Warhammer except for like a once in a blue moon, but you know, I just decided to do this because I did some stuff with AI the other day, so I was really questioning this. Also, I'm going to be talking really fast, so sorry, I'm trying to get this done. I only have a short time, so let's get into it. What if instead of Angron falling to the Chaos God of Khorne, Angron falls to a different Chaos God? This time I am choosing Slaanesh. Now you may be asking, why Slaanesh? And originally this was a what if I thought of for what if Angron fell to Tzeentch instead of Slaanesh. While Magnus fell to Nurgle, Mortarion fell to Slaanesh, and then Fulgrim fell to Khorne. But after looking more into it, I think just doing the opposite of the original in lore Chaos Gods could be more interesting topic. So if y'all like this, let me know down in the comments and I'll do the other three, that being Magnus to Nurgle, Fulgrim to Khorne, Mortarion to Slaanesh. Also, I skipped some sections of the lore that I feel don't have as huge impact to this new timeline, but if you want to ask or discuss, please do not hesitate to ask. I love talking to all of you guys. So to begin, let's talk about the tale of an alternate dark path. We need to understand some original lore and what changes. Number one, instead of Angron after being discovered by the High Riders and turned to a slave, what happened in our actual lore is like that happened in our actual lore, but this time he's instead was quote unquote adopted / invested in by a wealthy noble of the planet who saw much potential and monetary value in the young boy, especially after he saw all the dead Xenos around when he was first found. The noble actually took the time to train and mentor the young Angron in this timeline, which it leads to our next plot point. Also, I will already say, I say the word value a lot, so just a heads up. Now, number two, the Slave Rebellion. A couple years later in the lore, Angron led a slave rebellion, which did not fare too well. Originally, he had about 2,000 gladiators, but soon that number dwindled down to only 1,000. And in the lore, when Angron and his army had been surrounded by at least 7 large Nucerian armies, the Emperor came and took Angron away, making Angron hate him for the rest of his eternal life. Now, in this new what-if scenario, however, Angron instead still became a gladiator, but he was more closer to his new investor than he was to the original lore father figure and friend that he had. The original friend came to Angron one night and asked if he was interested in running away and becoming free. Angron, realizing he was talking about revolution, weighed his options like a businessman, and later on, he chose to reveal everything the original friend told him to his investor, who quickly had the rebellion crushed, and the investor and Angron were actually paid quite handsomely due to Angron's, help. And to much of Angron's amusement, this led to the investor giving Angron his quote-unquote freedom, I guess you can say. It's more like he was given a higher role in management. He still fought in the pits as a higher paying attraction, so kind of like a special attraction, but he was actually getting paid, unlike the other slaves. Angron soon understood logistics and monetization and value, and his investor father actually decided to implant Angron with a special device for a special occasion, that being a neural implant to help strategize value and still help him with fighting. Almost like a small precog, but not like Sanguinius level premonition precognition. He does change, and later on he goes and actually conquers Nuceria instead of the normal using weapons and armies. Instead, he takes over Nuceria by backdoor deals, politicking, and having more of a business sense strategy. Do not get me wrong, he still does slaughter what he considers undervalue, and if it also impacts his value, he will get into a small rage and be very violent. But as long as it doesn't mess with that, he's content and happy. He don't care. He just wants more though. Number three, the arrival of the Emperor. In the original timeline, the Emperor came to see his son Angron lead a rebellion and be backed into a corner and surrounded. Fast forwarding, the Emperor stole Angron from his army and led the slaves to die, which led Angron to hold a massive grudge against the Emperor and his Imperium. Woo. But in this new timeline, Angron is not leading a rebellion. Instead, Angron is actually leading a small empire, and he himself is allowing slaves. When the Emperor arrives, he is shocked a little. He was not expecting one of his sons to be leading an empire of slaves, especially Angron, because Angron had a Primarch power of empathy, and so it's kind of amazing that he became a slaver. But just like the nails, instead of them making him angry all the time, the neural implant made him more methodical and more strategical. The Emperor had a long talk with Angron and invited him into the Imperium, but he had to get rid of his slavery laws. That was not for the benefit of mankind, and that is mainly what the Emperor wanted. Number 4, when Angron led his World Eaters in the original timeline, they were very bloodshed oriented. They just wanted to slaughter, even though it would lead to a lot of their forces being destroyed, and it did not help that if they failed Angron's ruling of conquering a planet in 31 solar hours, he would order a decimation, which would lead to 1 out of every 10 World Eaters in a unit being brutally killed by the other 9 in the unit. But in our new timeline, when Angron was met with his Gene Sons, he saw a huge jump in his value. So he started going through the whole ranks and reorganizing his sons based on their future and current value, to which one in particular stood out: the 8th Assault Captain, Khorne. He was quickly given the role of being Angron's personal equerry after the reorganization, and instead of them being given the name World Eaters, this time they were called the Crimson Syndicate. Their tactics changed massively. The normal World Eaters charge into the enemy and say screw strategy, they just love the mindless slaughter and destruction. However, with the new Syndicate, they changed their tactics. Frontline fighting, that's easy. Just use the Guardsmen, Mercenary, or Penal Legions heavily, or any useful tools they can come across. Save the Space Marines for very specific tasks, but do not just send small squads of like 3 to 5 to 10, stuff like that. Instead, send entire companies to keep value. They want it done properly. They want as minimal casualties and loss of architecture as possible. This honestly makes them a more scary opponent. Imagine seeing a huge towering marine facing you during a battle and imagining your head on a spike. Yeah, that's scary. But a huge towering marine choosing to pick what value you could have and sending you to become either a slave or live corpse starch is another fear totally. And honestly, I prefer the regular World Eaters to the Crimson Syndicate. Number 5, the Horus Heresy. Skipping a few decades again, when Horus is in the original timeline told Angron that he was going to rebel, Angron immediately, no hesitation, joined up. But in this new timeline, Horus was very cautious to approach Angron. Horus decided to play it smart because he knew Angron loved value and chose to wage wars for the highest value. Angron even deliberately politicked to their father if he was given a task of choosing a world that had barely any resources, just barren, straight land. He would instead argue that the neighboring system that the Salamanders or the Space Wolves or the Imperial Fists were going to attack had more civilians and could result in higher casualties, so his Crimson Syndicate should take its attacks instead of the other faction. And instead, they could have this barren planet for their new settlements. Horus knew this, so he chose deliberately to provide as much wealth and value to Angron to have him join him. He knew that if the Imperium managed to show Angron a bigger value than him, Angron would betray him. So he chose to tell him he could enslave as much as possible and also have massive freedom to rule his own empire. He even gave him one thing he knew Angron wanted: to be able to invade and take over Ultramar from their brother Rabute. Rabute saw Angron's tactics during a siege and was disgusted, since Rabute built very impressive logistics that held worlds in line and kept them perfect. Angron loved to attack those logistics of those worlds. He attacked and managed to win most of his wars using those tactics. So to best put it, Angron and Rabute really did not have a good friend relationship. But unlike the original timeline, Horus was not recruiting a weapon. He was negotiating with a king. Now, number 6, the Shadow Crusade. So in the Shadow Crusade, Lorgar and Angron attack Rabute and Ultramar in what I would say is a wonderful story. I have to say my favorite is when Rabute is talking to Lorgar's kind of it's like a little vision, and he is so mad. The one phrase I love hearing the most is Rabute in a very angry telling Lorgar, "I will gut you, I will end you." Like, I didn't think the pencil pusher Rabute would be that angry, but the Shadow Crusade was a very, very great lore-wise story. I can't do it justice, and I will say, if you haven't heard the Remembrancer talk about it, you need to. I beg you, please, 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 go listen to it. It is my favorite video of all time. I love it to pieces. That and the Bjorn, that is pretty funny too. But in this new timeline, Lorgar goes off to attack Rabute, and Horus is a bit leery, but still sends Angron to go assist Lorgar. Angron and his forces wait to see what the plans are of the Word Bearers, until they see Ultramar's system being destroyed and its value tanking. Angron is seething in anger, something not even most of his brothers have seen totally. Lorgar meets with an enraged Angron, who upon first contact on the planet, Angron smacks Lorgar off his feet with the back end of his axe. Lorgar is shocked, asking his brother why he attacks him. Angron would quickly retort, saying that Lorgar is destroying value and he will not allow that. But before the two can fight each other, Rabute arrives and immediately attacks Lorgar. He jump lunges for it. Angron would hold him would hold back from becoming, into the fight, more methodically at least, until he sees in his precog that Rabute will try and kill Lorgar, in which he will shoot his Archaeotech pistol at Rabute, distracting him, and then throwing his spear into Rabute's shoulder, launching him away from Lorgar. That was Angron. The crusade would continue, but instead of 26 worlds being destroyed, it was about 15. They were slower due to the World Eaters choosing to keep the value of the planets high, but Ultramar could not reclaim them due to two factors. One, the Ruin Storm, and also since the Crimson Syndicate decided to destroy the logistics of the area in the Ultramar system, and it would take time to remake those logistics, but since they are in the Heresy, they don't have much time. And during the Ruin Storm, Angron fought against a Titan to release tension he had from dealing with his brothers, and that almost ended up him being crushed by that Titan. Lorgar decided to do a ritual giving Angron to the Chaos God of Excess, Slaanesh. Angron was not happy about being tricked by Lorgar, so Lorgar quickly ran away. He was like, I'm not staying around for this. Number 7, the Siege on Terra. In the original lore, Angron was shot from the Night Lord's capital ship down to the surface of Terra. He managed to assault the palace, but was stopped by Sanguinius. In this new timeline, Angron was not in the Night Lord's capital ship. Instead, he was sitting on his throne on the command deck of his ship, the Conqueror. I'm keeping it the same as the lore. And he was watching the battle happen on the ground with his forces and calculating the value of everything happening. Troops being deployed, forces being decimated, Titans being dropped. He felt disgusted, but then he decided to join in. He led his personal guard and Khorne with the newly made 6th Heavy Assault Company to fight against Sanguinius and his Blood Angels defending the gates. Sanguinius was upset at the loss of Angron, choosing to fall to chaos. Angron was not amused. He chuckled against Sanguinius's complaints, but he still broke through the gates, letting hordes of Chaos Infantry through until in a desperate attempt, Sanguinius led a suicidal charge against Angron and managed to defeat Angron. Sort of. He wounded him deeply, and Angron decided that this war was no longer profitable. If you remember that is from Hondo Anaka from Star Wars. I absolutely love that, and he was a massive kind of influence in this whole story, bringing his sons away from the fighting, leading to what would eventually happen in the original lore. The Emperor kills Horus, gets interred on the Golden Throne, and then the next 10,000 years occurs Asada. Now, for any mop-ups, number 1, who would fall to Khorne? And for that, I would say it would be Conrad. But instead of it being normal and Conrad dying after his head cut off from the assassin sent by the Emperor, he was resurrected by Khorne. In a sick, twisted game, Conrad would constantly be trying to end himself, but would do it in spectacular ways to keep bringing more skulls to Khorne and more blood, which would make Conrad go more insane and hate himself. Meanwhile, Khorne is getting an amusing tool and absolutely loving it, because no matter how many times he has to resurrect Conrad is still uber powerful, and just he's dying in so many funny ways. Khorne is actually laughing a lot. Now, what would happen to Fulgrim? Because originally he was the prince, he was Slaanesh's chosen. Well, the Layer Blade, I guess. He would actually die in the fight against Ferris, both Primarchs killing each other in a twisted, meaningful death. He still pick up the Layer Blade, but he didn't choose him. Like, the Lair Demon decided to back off a little bit instead of going fully, and both Ferris and Fulgrim killed each other, which is kind of sad, but it's a twisted, meaningful death. Of course, the Crimson Syndicate Legion will break into warbands after the Siege of Terra, but instead of random warband segments, they would be under the ruling of Angron, who has each warband accumulate more wealth and value for the Syndicate, and for Slaanesh. Khorne would lead his own warband called the Lords of New Syria after attacking and claiming systems that heavily impressed both Angron and Slaanesh. So yeah, this is my what if video. I hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to hit that like button, and if you enjoyed it, comment down below and also subscribe. Remember to hit that bell notification if you do not see a post or upload that I might do. And I will catch y'all later. Bye.